All right, hello everybody. How you doing? Last session of the day. Think you can make it? I'm here to talk about a data and analytics system that we implemented for the Raiders. And in full transparency, I need to tell you this is not the sexy Moneyball player analytics that you might have hoped it was. It's the ticketing, sales, fan engagement side of the business side of the business. And they really keep, most teams I find really keep those analytics teams separate, unfortunately. So I'm not going to be offended if some of you want to spend your time elsewhere. However, if you'd like to understand how a modern cloud data system like the one I'm going to talk about might help your company, or stick around. So a little bit about me. I started, I'm actually ran a consulting firm called Data Climber, used my last name. The domain was available 5 years ago, and we've been doing modern cloud data systems for a variety of industries, including Major League Sports. We started actually with the San Francisco Giants about 3 years ago, and that led to this, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Prior to this, I built a data team at Salesforce, and I've been building and leading data teams most of my career. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, been doing that for a long time. So Data Climber, we're a premier consulting firm specializing in data warehousing systems implementation and best practices and design patterns throughout that entire stack. And we really focus on data culture change at the end of the day. So we're absolutely trying to democratize data, have an entire company really leverage the value of your data, and actually treat data as a product. And that's where you're going to get all the complete value of the system. The Raiders. Now, the Raiders have a really interesting story. I was totally hooked by their data story, if you will, when I first learned about it about a year ago. They're in a very unique position, totally unique and interesting compared to all other major league teams in this country. And that's because of the location. So they're here in Vegas, right? And the demographic in Vegas changes every week, right? They don't have a static demographic. Now, of course, there's local fan base, but they have a lot of opportunity, right, with the crowds coming in every week. So one week it's AWS nerds like us, and the next week it's the rodeo, right, and it's Cowboys. So they're really trying to figure out how to deal with all of that data, essentially, and how to market, sell to those different demographics. And on top of that, that means they've got a lot of partners that they never had before. All the casinos, on the Strip, all of the other venues and locations that are going to be interested in the same demographic, essentially. So sharing data and making sure that they can market to those folks appropriately. On top of that, for those of you who don't know, the Raiders were in Oakland for many, many years. They just moved here last year, built the stadium. In Oakland, they didn't have ownership of the stadium. So there's a limited amount of stuff they could do from a data standpoint. Here, they own the stadium. They have a lot more they can do. So a whole new swath of opportunities. On top of that, that means that they can really focus on events as well. And honestly, I think they might make more revenue off events than off football, possibly in Vegas. And that's partly because the Strip, especially, but Las Vegas overall, has not had a venue of this size. So now there's a lot of performers and acts that can come in that never really could come to Vegas before. So there's, again, this whole new opportunity for the Raiders with their data. And the system they were on before was just not going to cut it. So that's why we came in and helped out. And I wanted to, I'll go over these in a second, actually, but the system they were on, and this is typical of a lot of sports teams, they're using third-party managed services solutions, which 5-10 years ago was a great idea. These organizations are not that big, 300, 400, 500 people, not a lot of necessarily data engineering or data expertise, technical expertise in the business, and so outsourcing that makes a lot of sense. But the problem is data's gotten a lot more complex. The sort of analytics that they can do has gotten more complex, as I was just mentioning with the Raiders. And so these systems are not flexible enough for them. And on top of that, there's just a lot of latency and sort of slowness in doing analytics and getting the job done they need done. And again, I'll go over a lot of that in the next few slides. But it's basically inflexible enough. So the only solution really for that is to have a modern solution that they own and they control, and they can do anything they want with. So a data platform, if you will, that you can do anything with. So that's where we're going with this. So again, and this is not just because they moved to Vegas, but for years, right? They just couldn't work with a lot of the existing data partners they had, even the concessions companies, parking, et cetera. And again, that got even more complex in Vegas. And that really meant that they were unable to provide timely analytics to the business in a lot of cases for a variety of reasons, but analytics was just too slow. It was also really hard to democratize data, partly because data was all over the place, and it was just really hard to get a consistent data set out to a lot of the different employees, sales and marketing especially. So all this led to not being able to analyze a lot of different aspects of the business and so on and so on. So it's just a real big challenge for them. From a technical side, and this is sort of some of the reasons for those business problems, was the existing systems, black box system, again, the third party sort of managed service that they could not really control and didn't have access to. So when they wanted to do a customization to the system, and in our world of data warehousing and analytics, that usually means transforming data, creating a new set of tables, maybe in creating a view in a database, something that will help you with your analytics to expedite it. That would take a long time to get that done. Query speeds were slow, performance was slow, there was system downtime for a variety of reasons. Siloed data, and part of that was because these systems couldn't handle just any data. It was really, these systems were designed, the legacy systems were designed for ticketing and very specific data sets, but not just anything. So just very inflexible. So there's a lot of the sort of laundry list of the challenges here. I'll dive into those just a little bit more. So for instance, when they wanted to make a change, they would log a ticket, and it could take weeks to months to get a change done. And there was a lot of things that the other systems, the legacy systems, really couldn't even handle. So they just felt stuck in a lot of ways when they wanted to do something new or different. Or, if they wanted to turn something around in a day or a week, it just was impossible. Things were slow. They didn't really have visibility into why things were slow either, and they weren't getting answers to that. There was also some significant downtime, these sorts of things. So all that stuff built up over time, and really were just creating a lot of friction for the team. And this is not unique to the Raiders. I've heard this story many times across, obviously not only Major League sports teams, but in industry in general, right? These are problems that almost every organization has to some degree, whether or not you own your system or not. Siloed data, and this is really, the siloed data is the one that really kills you, I think, in terms of performance. It really is important to have all your data centralized into one place. If you've ever tried to gather data from 3 different sources, put it into an Excel spreadsheet or something, it could take days. If you can't join your data with a SQL statement, or if you're running Python or something, in one statement, exponentially makes your analytics much slower, right? So not being able to silo or not being able to centralize your data creates a bunch of silos. And again, in their case, it wasn't that they knew they wanted to centralize their data, the Raiders did, but they couldn't because the system wouldn't take things like social data, certain kinds of social data from social ads, wouldn't fit into the old system, if you will. So that's always a huge problem across the board, siloed data. So let's get into some of the solutioning here. This talk is sponsored by Matillion. Matillion is a big partner of ours. We implement Matillion at hundreds of clients. And again, we started with Major League Sports with the San Francisco Giants, implemented this very same system there. And then we've subsequently done this for a variety of other teams. So Matillion, what is Matillion? Matillion is a ELT tool, ETL tool. That means extract, load, transform, which means basically a data platform that allows you to bring data in from a source, put it into a data warehouse, transform it, push it back into your systems. You can do whatever you want. So it's a very open, dynamic data platform. And this is personally what I love about it the most is the visual aspect. So it's a visual tool, has a workflow palette where you build out your data jobs. So it's very clear to see what the business logic is of all of your data processing. You can comment it really nicely, all sorts of ways to make it really understandable. And I think that's important, not just because it's nice for some people who are visually oriented maybe, but because you can onboard a new person very easily. You can hire a new employee and say, you don't have to really read through lines and lines of code, just go look at all of this visually, and you can pretty quickly learn how the data system works. So I really like that visual aspect of it. It seamlessly blends Python and SQL, so basically you can do anything you need to do with data in this one platform. So again, I think I kind of mentioned this, but I want to make sure that's clear that there's three main types of things you do with data in a data warehousing system. One is you ingest it into the system, and I'll show you a diagram in a second of this. Second, you transform it to make it much easier to use, because raw data coming into a system is usually not very analytics friendly. This raw data is coming from transactional systems that are not built for analytics, and so you might end up with 200 tables coming in from your ERP, and you can sort of boil that down and transform it and make it into 20 tables that are easy for analytics. So there's a lot of transformation that should be done. That's sometimes what I call the art of what we do, because the way you model data, I mean, I could do a whole talk on data modeling. There's a lot of different methodologies and best practices there. But when you're using a tool like Matillion, you're just basically coding, essentially, although it writes code for you, but you're configuring all of this so you can do whatever you need to do, and any model you can think of, you can support. So that's the transformation piece. And then finally, reverse ETL. Matillion is calling this sync. So this is the idea of taking data from your data warehouse and syncing it back into your systems. So for the raters, for instance, we take a lot of their fan data and push it back into their CRM. And there's kind of this notion out there now that I like to think about a lot, which is having companies run your company on your data warehouse. So your data warehouse can be more than just your analytics store. It can be your source of truth for business critical data that you're going to then push back into other systems, your email marketing system, CRM, whatever it is. And the source of truth is really the data warehouse. So it's becoming much more of a first-class business solution. And Matillion allows you to keep building all of that out. So those are some of the biggest reasons we like Matillion. I'll also add, I think I kind of said this, code optional. So Matillion will write code for you, but if you want to write your code, you can do that as well. So it's very flexible in that sense. And it has the other sort of innovation these days with modern ELT tools like this is it takes advantage of the power of the data warehouse for most of its processing. So it's really just generating code and pushing it down to the data warehouse layer and letting the massive engine that is the data warehouse do all the compute. That way they don't have to have their own data store, they don't have their own compute. Why do that when you have this amazing resource right there in front of you? This is as opposed to legacy ELT tools that had all of that. They were much more of a black box, and there was performance issues and so on and so forth. So that's kind of eliminated a lot of the headaches of data warehousing. And in fact, the next slide here, this overall solution is really a breath of fresh air for me. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and even 5 years ago, this was much, much more difficult to do. Much bigger headaches, and it's just a lot more seamless and quick today. So the full solution for the raters it looks like this. So you've got their data sources on the left. For ticketing, the raters use Ticketmaster. NFL in general uses Ticketmaster. So we actually are a Ticketmaster partner. You have to partner with Ticketmaster to even get their data. But we've done that. We understand their data, so we extract that. NFL provides each team with its own data set. CRM, so that's Salesforce in this case, and a bunch of others. There's concessions, there's e-commerce, there's social, all the social data, all that stuff will come in, and Matillion is the glue between all of this. So Matillion we will build the data jobs in Matillion. That will ingest the data into, in this case, a Snowflake data warehouse, and land it there, and then do the transformations and so forth. And then the team happened to be using Tableau as well. So that's a robust BI tool, and the complete system looks like that. The last piece you see in the middle there with Matillion is this kind of a smaller tool called Melissa Data. They're sort of the poster child for master data management and deduplication algorithms, so we use them. And it's kind of a testament to how flexible Matillion is, because Melissa has a couple different interfaces. There's an API, which, Matillion was never built for Melissa, but as long as there's an API, you can call any API with Matillion. And then there's also a little bit of a piece that we install on an EC2 server, and Matillion is the same way, actually. It's a semi-cloud because it's running within the VPC. And so we've been able to integrate those two together as well, again, because we can run anything. We can sort of have Matillion do anything we need it to do. So Melissa Data solves two problems for us in this entire thing. One is normalization of data. So one of the biggest business and technical problems, I guess, for the raters and for all teams is duplicate fan data, right? They've got fan data coming in from 5 different sources. I buy a ticket on Ticketmaster. I buy a jersey online. I've got 2 different records there, and sometimes I'm using a different address, what have you. So how do we match these together? So we send Melissa the address, phone number, email, standardizes it, normalizes it, so then we can compare and do matching. It also has matching algorithms that'll help us match all that up. So we end up with a golden record of the fan in the data warehouse, again, using sort of the Melissa-Matillion combination. And that's just one example of data transformation that we're doing among a lot of other things in the system. And then we push that back out into Salesforce in this case, so they have a clean record of all of their fans in Salesforce as well, and they can do a lot of their work from there. Yeah, so that's what the stack looks like. And some of these pieces can be, can sort of be plug and play in and out, but in general, this is what a modern data cloud or cloud stack data stack looks like. Okay, so again, the benefits for the raters for this particular solution were all about their control of the system. So they've got a fully customizable solution. It's team owned, meaning it's not a third-party hosted managed service. Data is all centralized now. There's no more data silos, so that increases analytics, the speed of analytics, of course, and the deduplication of the fan data. So it's actually a reduction in the number of records. And for some of our sports teams, we see a reduction of up to 15% of their database, meaning 15% of the people they thought they had are now deduped, and so they have a much cleaner record of the fan. And of course, their targeted marketing is really much more effective in that case. And that, by the way, is the ultimate goal here, is to understand their fan base better, to really get a 360-degree view of the fan, and then be able to then take action on all of that, right? From fan engagement, tons of different fan engagement strategies that they're using. And this is just getting started. The team just moved here last year. We implemented the system this year, and now they're off to the races to bring in even more and more data sets over time. And it'll never end, right? These data projects go on and on and on, because you're always coming up with new objectives to your business. You always have new challenges. And there's always new data you can apply to those challenges to get answers and take action on your data. I was going to ask, actually, who here is in the data warehousing or analytics role, if you will, for your role? Yeah, okay, about half of you. Nice. I wasn't sure how many pure data people would be here. All right, so you sort of, you probably have seen some of what I'm talking about, but again, the idea is to really take all these disparate data sources and come up with a very clear understanding of, either your customers, your partners, your business, whatever it is, but you have this single source of truth now that's really trusted too. Hopefully that's the other piece of building these systems, is to make sure you build in trust into those data pipelines, the transformations, whatever it is. You can't lose trust of the end users. And you have a sort of that reference knowledge base there. And then the democratizing of data through something like Tableau in this case, or whatever BI tool or end user interface visualization tool you have, is really important too. So there's a lot of aspects to all of this to really make this all work. It's not really just technology at all. It's methodology and process and people. The results for the raters. So now they really can do rapid analytics. They have a clean golden record of the fan. They can analyze that any which way they want. As one example, I'll give you one more example of a transformation that really helps all the teams we work with. So we'll create one table in their data warehouse that has every seat from every event through all of time in it. And there's about 150 columns in this table. So it's everything you'd ever want to know about the seat, the section it's in, the price it was sold at, the price it was originally sold at, if it was resold, the customer that purchased that seat, and on and on and on, right? So you have this really nice, rich data set of your customers and of the ballpark or the stadium in this case. And you can easily analyze, you can imagine, thousands of questions you can ask of this data, and it's a single table. So doing things like that is really important to help with your analytic speed. And again, you would do that all in Matillion up front and pre-process that so it's ready to go for analytics. And that can be happening on a pretty rapid pace too. It could be every 5 or 10 minutes, every hour, every 24 hours, kind of depends on the business need there. But anyway, so that's one way you get rapid analytics, by having a system like this. Again, more targeted campaigns, of course, with the single source of truth for their fan record. They've got a whole new list of ideas that they're going to start to implement for dealing with merchandising sales and, again, sort of fan engagement in general using this data. And I mentioned the events, right? So they're really gearing up to handle all of these other events they're going to host in the stadium. And how are they going to do that? And then gather all the data from all of those events as well, right? And start to analyze that. So there's endless opportunities there to find new customers and so forth. And then just keep expanding their data set, right? So the nice thing about the system, I guess I go back and look at it again, is it's very open and flexible. So if you have another data source that all of a sudden you want to start using, you just plug it in on the left-hand side. Matillion has a bunch of pre-built connectors, so if that's already built for you, it's really easy. If not, you just build a little code. There's still a lot of helper components in Matillion to help you connect to any system. Could be files too, file-based stuff. Could be, we've seen some really horrible legacy files from banks that can't quite imagine what format they're in, but we can handle it because we can process anything. So whatever it is, you just plug it in on the left-hand side there, build the data pipe, bring it into your data warehouse, sort of mold it into whatever data modeling approach you've taken, and make it part of your data set, and then it just augments what you have, so you can continue to analyze that alongside everything else and just get an even bigger, more of a 360-degree view of your business. All right. Go back to this one. Oh, not yet. So anyway, so adding a bunch of more data sets, and they're going to be adding quite a few over this year. They're really excited about 3. Next year, it'll probably be 10. Some of these teams that we work with have 20 to 30 data sources, and again, that can grow pretty quickly as well. And some are really small, some are large. There's all sorts of obscure data sets too, right? Like podcasts. Again, like a lot of the social data. So lots of really interesting stuff. And we also find a lot of concessions. Sometimes they're smaller vendors that really don't have a data platform, and they don't offer data very well, right? So you have to sort of work with them to make sure they at least can give you a standardized format on a regular basis, and get those pipelines going. But whatever it is, again, you can kind of manage it there. All right, that is it. I wanted to make sure that you guys got out of here without too much further ado. Again, my name is Aaron. We run a data consultancy. Happy to talk about any and all of this after the talk here. And if you have any questions, happy to answer those as well. Thank you.